Exhausted MOM unexpectedly falls asleep on a stranger, his incredible identity will shock you. Sarah's world dissolved into the chaos of plates clattering and the rush of orders at Eddie's diner. Another night of scalding coffee and impatient customers left her hollow. The diner, a microcosm of New York's vibrancy, echoed with laughter and complaints, yet all she felt was the weight of exhaustion holding her down. "Mom!" Emily's excited voice rang in her mind, a contrast to the anxiety crushing her as she left her shift. That spark of her daughter's dream, uprooted and fragile, felt so out of reach. She didn't just work for herself, she fought for Emily's better future, and sometimes, it felt like running in circles. On the subway, the rhythmic clatter of wheels against tracks was almost hypnotic. Sarah fought her drooping eyelids, desperate for even a minute of silence, a moment to catch her breath. But the relentless pulse of city life, coupled with her daily pressure, drew her closer to sleep. It felt inevitable, and before she knew it, her heavy head nestled against the shoulder of a stranger. As she drifted into slumber, time slipped away. Michael stared down, momentarily surprised. His everyday clothes masked the reality of his life, a celebrated entrepreneur committed to lifting families like Sarah's from despair. Yet, nothing prepared him for the deep weariness he noticed in Sarah. It spoke volumes of struggle. Just as he turned away, a screech of metal pulled her suddenly awake. Blinking, Sarah straightened, flustered and apologizing, warmth flooding her cheeks. "Don't worry about it," Michael replied, his grin disarming the tension. A conversation sparked between them, a thread weaving through their chaotic lives. Words spilled from Sarah, her dreams intertwined with her duties. The late-night scrubbing floors in office buildings were just as crucial as the serving trays. Hope clashed with the relentless drudgery of life, and she could almost taste bitterness. The roughness of working two jobs wore her down, yet fighting for Emily remained her North Star. When Michael suggested she could help inspire others through his charity's work, Sarah hesitated. Could she really step into that world? Doubt bit deeply. Would this be seen as abandoning her roots or an opportunity to break the cycle? Friends at the diner cautioned against it, echoing the sentiment that success tends to gloss over the simple struggles she had endured. "You'll just be another face in his world," one scoffed, her laughter taunting Sarah's ambition. In that pivotal moment, standing in Michael's bright charity office with plans laid bare, fear gripped her heart. The chance to share her story resonated, but against it loomed the familiar dread of failure, a shadow looming over her. Would they respect her experiences or view her as a spectacle of inspiration? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Michael stepped away to take a call, the weight of indecision crashed over her like a tidal wave. His absence unraveled her confidence, and uncertainty consumed her thoughts. Was she brave enough to embrace this chapter, or would she retreat, shackled to the very life she longed to change? The echoes of their conversation played in her mind like a haunting melody. An invisible door was ajar, inviting her into a world where she could rise above her struggles. Yet, she stood paralyzed, caught in the throes of fear, wondering if she'd ever muster the courage needed to step through. Sarah stood in the bright charity office, her thoughts racing like the city cars outside. The glossy brochures and vibrant posters on the walls were pulsing reminders of possibilities, yet they felt overwhelming. What kind of inspiration could she truly offer? Was she anything more than a tired waitress with dreams scraped together in the dead of night? The questions gnawed at her, suffocating her motivation. Across the room, Michael's voice rose in determination over his phone call, a stark contrast to her rising tide of self-doubt. She couldn't shake the image of the diner, the grease-stained floors, the clamor, the laughter of customers oblivious to her struggles. Those were her roots. They formed the very foundation of her identity. How could simply recounting her life shift perceptions? Taking a deep breath, she turned her gaze to the window. East River sparkled in the sunlight, brimming with vitality. You need to think beyond your exhaustion, she murmured to herself, as if encouragement could sprout from her own lips. She envisioned Emily, bright-eyed and innocent, fiercely clutching her dreams. Wasn't that worth the discomfort of stepping into the light? Within minutes, the phone call wrapped up and Michael returned, his expression radiating hope. He glanced at Sarah, sensing the tempest within her. "Hey, I can see you're in your head. What is going on?" He approached with a warmth that both calmed and unsettled her. She hesitated, quivering on the edge of honesty. "I'm just wondering if this is all too much for me. I'm just a waitress, Michael. I barely make ends meet." A smile crept across his face, but it didn't mask the seriousness of his tone. "And who better than you? You know the struggle. You've lived it. That's your strength." His words flickered inside her like a candle igniting in dim darkness. It dawned on her that sharing her reality wasn't a display of weakness or desperation, it could maybe be an act of rebellion against the narrative that confined her. The hesitation mutated into a fierce clarity. The lives she envisioned impacting people just like her, suspended in uncertainty, demanded authenticity and vulnerability. It's not just about storytelling, it's about empowering others by sharing the truths of working through life as it is, she found herself articulating. It felt liberating, an empowerment burgeoning within her. "Exactly," Michael chimed in, the passion lighting up his eyes. "The connections you make will resonate far beyond a single speech. You'd be creating a bridge back to hope for so many." Could she walk that bridge? Sarah wrestled with the exciting uncertainty that no longer felt like shackles but like a pathway leading somewhere new. She nodded slowly, feeling strength course through her veins. "Okay. Let us do this." As the words spilled from her mouth, adrenaline surged, replacing dread with determination. Yet, as excitement filled the room, another nagging sensation crept in. It was the feeling of an impending storm. Was she truly ready to confront the world beyond her diner? "Perfect. We'll set something up for next week," Michael replied, his face lighting up. But as they began discussing the details, an internal voice whispered, "What if you fail to make it impactful?" The ominous question curled itself around her thoughts like a snake, squeezing with anxiety. Somewhere in building her confidence, a flicker of trepidation erupted. Perhaps it was the fear of antagonism from those who doubted her journey, not from those she served but from those who thought their success shielded their struggles. Would she face condescension or skepticism in this new light she was hoping to embrace? Sarah pushed away from her worries. This mission, whatever it shaped into, was now palpable. Yet underneath her newfound courage lay an undercurrent of anxiety waiting to erupt. She could see the path ahead shimmering with potential and peril alike. As Michael continued laying out plans, Sarah's heart raced. The moment was upon her, but deep down something lingered. The real test loomed. Could she handle the new narrative inheriting her life, or would the weight of doubt drag her back into the shadows? Sarah needed clarity. Now was not just about sharing a story. It involved a confrontation, an assertion of self that she could no longer ignore. The moment of truth was closing in, haunting her thoughts even as hope surged while determination blossomed like flowers in the sun. The shadows from her past whispered warnings of failure. The clock ticked towards decisions, but the looming challenge pressed closer to her heart. What if stepping into that light cast her into deeper shadow instead? As days slipped away leading up to her speech, Sarah plunged headfirst into preparation. She crafted her narrative, structuring it like a lifeline she could throw to others adrift in the murky waters of life. Her nights grew shorter as she rehearsed, whispering her words into the mirror, willing herself to believe the story she was telling. Yet, here in the sanctuary of the charity office, she felt more like the actress on a stage, portraying a character she feared she could never embody fully. Waves of uncertainty dashed against her resolve. Questions churned like ocean tides. Was she worthy of being heard? Could the woman who served coffee to the exhausted really offer insights that mattered? Each rehearsal session began as a spark of inspiration but fizzled out in the wake of her spiraling thoughts. One evening, while shuffling through old photographs searching for inspiration, she stumbled upon an image of herself in high school. It captured a younger Sarah smiling, unburdened and overflowing with ambition. The contrast against her weary reflection that stared back in the window struck her like a blow. "What happened to you?" she whispered. That night, forgetting the rehearsal, she sat on her bed with the photo clutched between trembling fingers. Memories fluttered to life, dreams of becoming a writer, igniting conversations with friends about the world, and hopeful aspirations. The ache of those forgotten ambitions seeped into her thoughts. Was she still that optimistic girl, or had she surrendered her dreams to a life of waiting tables and wondering what could have been? The next morning, determined to confront the specter of her past, she reached for her journal. Writing became a cathartic release, a means of reclaiming the voice she thought she had silenced. Her pen flew across the pages, capturing the raw truth of her struggles as a waitress juggling bills, her dreams trailing behind like a shadow. "Each story counts," she scribbled fiercely, "and every voice has something to offer if one dares to believe." Inspired by that rhythm of words, she resolved to shape her journey into more than a recount of her hardships. It would become a testament to resilience. Michael's encouragement lingered like a brand against her thoughts. Stepping into the light meant embracing vulnerability, and perhaps she was finally ready for that leap, flaws, fears, and all. The idea of confronting her past brought unease, yet it was overshadowed by an unexpected surge of clarity. Wasn't this the kind of authenticity she craved in others? Weekday mornings in the diner felt different now. Sarah embraced interactions rather than merely surviving them. She engaged with the regulars, learned their names, and shared snippets of her preparation. Each conversation became a thread in the tapestry of her new narrative. Weekends dissolved into a hazy blur of mounting confidence, and soon, she was bustling between tables, laughter spilling over anxieties. Yet, as the day of her speech approached, the undercurrent of doubt resurfaced. Did her journey ring true still? Would the story of a waitress resonate with those who never brushed shoulders with the grind of service? Anxiety clawed at her resolve, but she fought back, determined to rise above. The final touch of her speech lingered at the tip of her tongue, an echo from a tough encounter with a patron who dismissed her dreams outright. Her voice, steadier now, filled her thoughts with purpose. What if I fail? What if I succeed? The duality of those questions lit a fire in her belly, but the weight of potential judgment hovered ominously. As the morning sun broke into her apartment, the day loomed ahead with promise mingled with shadows. Sarah understood she could walk onto that stage. I could conquer the self-doubt restraining her. Yet the lurking fear shadowed every step she took. What if in sharing her story, she unleashed something monumental within herself? And where would that revelation lead? Clutching her notebook filled with words wrought from struggle, she faced the frost of her unease. The moment loomed ahead, heavy and robust, as she navigated her thoughts. Standing on the precipice of revelation, she realized the path forward was fraught with uncertainty but also ripe with potential. The time had come to face the truth of her life and the fears entwined within it. The sun cast a warm glow through Sarah's apartment window, but it did little to dispel the chill of apprehension wrapping around her heart. Today was the day she would step onto that stage and share her story, leaving the confines of doubt and hesitation behind. Yet, the closer it drew, the heavier her chest felt, as if an anchor had settled there, steadying her resolve with every beat. She paced her living room, rehearsing the lines that had once flowed effortlessly from her mind onto paper. Now, they felt like jagged edges clashing against her insecurities. She questioned the potency of her story. Would others find it relatable? After all, image was everything in a world that often glorified glamour over grit. But wasn't authenticity powerful? A separate part of her clung to that thought, wrestling with the dissonance of her fears. With unsteady hands, she flipped open her journal. The pages were a kaleidoscope of emotions, a tapestry woven from vulnerability and strength. She read her own words, reminding herself of the journey she had chronicled. Each struggle, each moment of self-doubt represented a thread that had built the very fabric of her narrative. Sarah inhaled deeply. She needed to trust this not merely as a collection of experiences, but as a living testament to her resilience. Still, the specter of judgment loomed. Thoughts spiraled back to the diner's regulars and their curious, often judgmental stares. Despite their familiarity, a part of her felt like an outsider, performing for an audience that often dismissed the mundane. "You're more than just a waitress," Michael's voice echoed in her mind, stirring both gratitude and guilt. What would he think if he saw her crumble under the weight of the stage? A resolute breath escaped her lips as she moved toward the small mirror on her wall. The reflection that stared back wore a mask of complacency. Sarah raised her chin, summoning an inner strength that had long lingered beneath layers of doubt. Today, she was not merely telling a story, she was reclaiming her identity, the aspiring writer, the passionate dreamer. That girl could still exist in her, but she needed to welcome her back. The clock marched forward, and each tick reverberated through her bones. Time felt like a relentless tide, pushing her toward an inevitable encounter with her fears. Each hour that slipped by tightened the knot in her stomach. Could she truly speak her truth without crumbling? But the answer came through her own introspection. The only way to silence the self-doubt was to embrace it, to transform it into fuel rather than chains. With newfound bravery igniting within her, Sarah grabbed her notes and made the decision to not merely recount her pain, but to expose the passion that lay beneath. This was her opportunity to connect with others, to show that growth stemmed from struggles. She envisioned standing before a sea of eager minds, seeking understanding and perhaps inspiration, just as she had once sought it herself. The weight she carried felt lighter as she honed in on what she truly wanted to convey. She wouldn't shy away from her vulnerabilities but rather embrace them as part of her narrative. The path ahead was daunting, but maybe, just maybe, there was solace in uncertainty, a chance to discover a new version of herself who could stand tall amid vulnerability. As she slipped on her jacket, a flicker of anticipation coursed through her veins. This was more than just a speech, it was a launchpad into the unknown depths of her potential. At that moment, as she stepped out of her apartment, Sarah realized that whatever awaited her beyond those doors held both fear and possibility. With the venue in the distance, she felt a surge of determination swell within that began to drown out the fading whispers of doubt. But another thought, sharper than the rest, stabbed through her confidence. What if she faltered? What if her narration turned to ash before the eyes of her audience? The stage loomed ahead, and while her heart raced with trepidation, a spark ignited inside her like a coiled spring ready to be released. But would the strength she had summoned sustain her once the spotlight was on her? The stage felt like a chasm, a yawning divide between the person Sarah was and the person she aspired to be. The bright lights washed over her, blurring the outlines of both the audience and her insecurities. She hesitated at the edge of the platform, the microphone in her hand suddenly seeming heavier than it ever had before. Her breath quickened as she scanned the crowd, diverse faces filled with a spectrum of emotions, interest, curiosity, and perhaps the barest hint of skepticism. It was a visceral reminder of her own self-doubt, echoing like a distant drum. Maybe this was a mistake, she thought, the whisper of doubt creeping back in like an unwelcome guest. Her heart raced as every step felt weighty, each one dragging down her resolve. She shook her head, mentally pushing back against the tide of misgivings. Silence enveloped the space, and she recognized the tension that hung thick in the air was not all about her. Others craved connection and understanding just as fervently. It was time to confront her own demons rather than let them dictate the narrative of the day. Sarah took a deep breath, grounding herself in the reality of the moment. A part of her realized that standing here with uncertainty was itself an act of courage. The first few words tumbled into the stillness like hesitant raindrops. It felt awkward at first, a stilted connection attempting to take root. Yet, as she spoke, the initial awkwardness ebbed away. The stories slid from her lips, painted with hues of pain but also vibrant strokes of growth. Her own life experiences unfolded in raw and vivid detail. She described nights filled with self-doubt, illustrated moments when her aspirations seemed distant dreams. Yet, nestled within those shadows were fragments of light, moments where she made a choice to fight back, to embrace her narrative rather than surrender to it. The audience leaned in, their rapt attention granting her wings. It was as if she was metamorphosing before their eyes, transforming vulnerability into strength. She began to notice subtle shifts in their expressions, people nodding, some wiping tears from their eyes. This was a revelation. Sharing her perception was bringing them along for the journey. What had felt like an act of desperation was now becoming a dialogue, a communion of shared experiences rising above the surface of loneliness. Tackling her narrative, she confronted the mirror of judgment that had long paralyzed her. Instead of expecting her story to be ridiculed, Sarah realized it was met with compassion. Her pulse quickened not from fear but from the thrill of being seen, of shedding the layers that had cocooned her from the world. Each moment on stage added to her confidence, each laugh and tear from the audience reminding her of the beauty and honesty. As she approached the conclusion, words brimmed on her lips, ready to spill out the lessons she had learned. She had come to appreciate the grit it took to keep pushing forward through adversities, how deeply her identity was tied to the struggles she had overcome. This wasn't merely a narrative, it was a clarion call to everyone who had ever felt trapped by their circumstances. But just as she reached her crescendo, she noticed someone in the audience whose gaze locked onto her with intensity. His expression was one of understanding, yet carried the weight of something else, something profound. The eyes were familiar yet unfocused, as if they held secrets she had long ignored, unsettling yet inviting her to learn more. It sent a ripple of uncertainty through her, intertwining admiration with questions she hadn't yet allowed herself to voice. The speech began to fade, but her heart quickened with the realization that her pathway of growth did not simply end with her storytelling. The spark ignited by her revelations on stage was just beginning, and Sarah faced the challenge of her next steps. How would this new connection shape her journey? The acceptance of vulnerability was merely the start. The question now loomed: could she step into yet another uncertainty, seeking to uncover a deeper sense of purpose in that compelling gaze? The following day, Sarah found herself still buzzing with adrenaline, the echoes of her performance reverberating in her mind. The applause from the audience had felt like a bomb, but the unsettling gaze from the stranger lingered like an unanswered question. In the quiet aftermath, her ordinary routine felt suddenly weighty, each task a counterpoint to the thrill of connection and vulnerability she had experienced. Sitting at her desk, she realized the speech had opened a portal within her, a doorway into potential she hadn't fully fathomed until now. As she navigated through the day's obligations, a flicker of determination ignited. Each interaction became a rehearsal, a soft whisper urging her to explore the depths of her newfound confidence. Conversations with colleagues turned into exchanges about personal ambitions, and as she spoke about her own journey, she began to sense a shift in her approach. This time, she sought to share not just the surface details, but the raw, unfiltered emotions that made her experience resonate. In the bustle of work, Sarah noticed the micro-reactions of those around her. She played back their expressions, the small nods of understanding, the moments of quiet reflection as she spoke. Was it possible her struggles resonated with others, too? Ambitious thoughts swirled within her, igniting a desire to bring her storytelling to a broader canvas. That evening, she sat down with a notebook, the blank pages a stark contrast to the chaos in her mind. The act of writing felt like an extension of her performance, an opportunity to expand on what she had shared and to confront the parts of her history she still hesitated to elaborate on. Would this lead to something bigger? A blog, perhaps, where she could explore deeper themes and connect with others feeling similarly lost and inspired to rise? The idea took root, tearing through her hesitation. Each stroke of the pen became a declaration of her commitment to self-exploration, a vivid canvas on which she could paint her journey. But as her resolve solidified, that disquieting image of the stranger emerged again. Who was he? Why had his gaze struck her so deeply? A sense of urgency enveloped her. She needed answers. The following weekend, Sarah attended a local cafe that was known for its community events, a place where she hoped she might run into him again. The atmosphere buzzed with chatter and laughter, people connecting over coffee. With each glance toward the door, her heart raced. What if he was here? What could she say to him that would bridge the silence between them? Suddenly, she spotted him, his familiar silhouette cutting through the crowd. Her breath caught as her mind raced. She could approach him, strike up a conversation, but the weight of her own doubts brought her to a standstill. This was a moment that could redefine her. As she gathered her thoughts, standing in the awkward gap between action and uncertainty, Sarah faced a choice: would she act on her instincts and find clarity in the unknown, or retreat back into the safety of her familiar routine? With a deep breath, she stepped out of her comfort zone, her heart pounding with each footfall. But just as she neared him, a wave of voices flooded her mind, reminding her of every previous time she had hesitated. What if he wasn't who she imagined? The decision loomed large, but Sarah stood resolutely in the pulsating possibilities. Could this moment become a pivotal point that would bridge her past with her evolving identity? As she prepared to speak, uncertainty wrapped around her, but she discovered that uncertainty could also be the birthplace of transformation. Would she uncover a deeper sense of her own narrative in this encounter, or would she walk away without answers yet again? The sharp intake of breath echoed in Sarah's mind as she began to step closer to the stranger. Each stride felt heavy, weighted by her conflicting fears and burgeoning aspirations. Was she truly ready to defy that habitual retreat into silence, to lay herself bare before someone who had sparked her imagination in such an unsettling way? The stakes felt colossal, not just a conversation, but a chance at unraveling a thread woven into her recent self-discovery. As she took a step forward, she felt the weight of her own courage mixed with apprehension. What if this encounter complicated the clarity she'd sought? What if he turned out to be just an ordinary person after all, and all the electricity she felt was merely a reflection of her own inner turmoil? No, she chastised herself, this was a moment of potential, not a reason for retreat. The sounds around her faded into an indistinct murmur as she approached him. Her mind raced with questions, calculated strategies floating in and out. Was there a specific angle she could use? Approach it lightly, or dive straight into the depths of vulnerability? The uncertainty rippled through her, but that nagging impulse to confront her anxiety propelled her onward. Finally, she was close enough to observe the details: the color of his shirt, the intensity of his focus on the pages in front of him. He seemed absorbed in whatever he was reading, oblivious to the world around him, including her teetering on the brink of existence. "Excuse me," she managed to utter, her voice breaking slightly under the pressure of her heart's heavy beats. His head jerked up, and their eyes locked for the briefest moment. Behind those hazel eyes, she glimpsed an abrupt recognition, then intrigue. "Hi," he replied, a slight smile creeping onto his lips. The ease of his expression quelled her panic momentarily, making her feel seen, if only for a brief second. I saw you the other day, after the speech." The words surged from her lips, propelled by an impulse she couldn't quite articulate. "I just wanted to say hi." He raised an eyebrow, the curiosity peeking just beneath the remnants of his prior detachment. "I remember you. You were incredible up there." His tone was warm, disarming the tension that had wrapped around her chest. Yet, in that split second, an uncomfortable reverberation pulsed through her. Incredible. Did she deserve such a description? Self-doubt kicked in, tugging at her mind as she wrestled to determine the utility of his compliment. "Thank you. I'm just trying to figure things out." "Keep trying," he encouraged, leaning forward ever so slightly. Sarah's heart raced again, but this time it was with the thrill of potential connection instead of dread. "What are you hoping to figure out?" His question required introspection, and for the first time, Sarah felt that perhaps her answer could be profound. Admitting out loud what she hoped to achieve was a vulnerability she hadn't anticipated. "I want to share my experiences, my story, maybe help others feel less alone. Yet it's daunting." The stranger leaned back, contemplative, giving her words weight. "That's brave," he said finally. "You think you're the only one who feels heavy with uncertainty? You'd be surprised how many people relate to that." A flicker of recognition ignited within Sarah, a sense of belonging perhaps. She had entered into a moment of shared vulnerability rather than standing isolated in her chaos. Yet, just as the conversation began to flow, his phone buzzed violently on the table, jolting her back to reality. The look on his face changed, hardening slightly, and she felt the fragile thread connecting them begin to fray. "I need to take this." "I'm sorry," he said, and with those words, the vulnerability of the moment hung suspended in the air. As the call drew him away, Sarah's heart sank, mingling both disappointment and intrigue. How could she turn this fleeting moment into something more profound? Alone now in the crowd, her thoughts cascaded. Who was he and why did his brief presence stir such dormant feelings in her? As she processed the encounter, a question burned at the forefront of her mind: was it truly about the stranger, or was he merely a catalyst awakening a deeper thirst for her own journey? With renewed determination and questions looming, Sarah picked up her notebook again, her pen ready to confront the wild revelation the answer she sought might lie deeper than a mere chance encounter. And in the silence that followed, she envisioned her quest to find the stranger and the truth behind the upper realm of her own narrative. Would this pursuit bring further clarity, or unravel everything she thought she knew? The clatter of coffee cups and murmurs of conversation faded into the background as Sarah sat, notebook in hand, the weight of possibilities pressing down upon her. His words echoed in her mind, "You think you're the only one who feels heavy with uncertainty?" She had shared a glimpse of her dream, but the real challenge was not the dream itself, it was how to pursue it against the tide of her own fears. She flipped open the notebook and stared at the blank pages. The lines waited patiently, like an audience eager for a performance. But her thoughts churned, a storm of self-doubt swirling within. Each sentence she began to write seemed shaky, unsteady, like a house of cards threatening to collapse at the slightest breeze. Was her story truly worth telling? Could vulnerability lead to strength, or would it expose her at her weakest? The stranger's encouragement lingered. It ignited a flicker of resolve. Perhaps she was on the precipice of something significant. In this digital age, could sharing her story really touch others? She had seen the impact of stories, the way they could unite people, inspire change, and spark hope in the darkest of times. Yet something tugged at her, pushing her backward. If she put her experiences on display, she would be vulnerable not just to others but to herself, laying bare insecurities she had hidden for so long. What if others ridiculed her? What if her tales of pain and triumph fell flat? Would anyone relate, or would she stand alone in her struggles? Suddenly, the cafe door swung open, and a cold gust rushed in, scattering napkins across the floor. It felt like a sign. She glanced towards the entrance, and for a heartbeat, her breath hitched. Would it be him? The stranger, the catalyst for her budding resolve? But as the door settled and her heart resumed its steady rhythm, she realized it was merely an elderly couple seeking refuge from the wind. She shook her head, chastising herself for the distraction. No more waiting for signs or chances, this was her moment to seize. A surge of determination flooded her as she focused on the notebook once more. The blank pages could transform into a vessel of her voice, her struggles, her triumphs, her journey. What if she began by detailing her feelings of isolation? Could she express the suffocating grip of anxiety, the laughter that came too easily to hide it? Or perhaps she could shed light on the pressures of societal expectations, the relentless pull to conform while craving authenticity. The pen moved fluidly across the page, words began to flow as she embraced the tension of authenticity over the comfort of silence. She wrote fervently, pouring her thoughts into the lined paper, feeling a sense of empowerment envelop her. But deep down, another question simmered: where did the stranger fit into this evolving narrative? He was more than just a face in the crowd, he had triggered something profound, awakening aspirations she had buried for far too long. Was she merely chasing him, or was she pursuing her own potential through the lens of their fleeting connection? The cafe around her grew dimmer as evening descended, shadows stretching like the doubts still clinging to her psyche. The question plagued her: could she turn a transient moment into sustained momentum, leading her to fully embrace her own story? With renewed focus, she looked down at her notes, a flicker of ambition sparking within her. She needed to find him again, to understand precisely what had emboldened her in that moment. But more importantly, she had to discover whether she could rely on her own strength to push beyond the discomfort of uncertainty, even if it meant stepping into the unknown once more. As she closed her notebook, a single phrase swirled in her mind like a haunting melody: was the truth she sought out there waiting for her, or buried deep within her own heart, the challenge lay ahead. She would have to confront the layers of her identity, unraveling each thread of fear and hope, as she embarked on a deeper journey toward self-discovery. Would she find the stranger again, or was the real revelation waiting in the uncharted territories of her own courage? Sarah exited the cafe, the cool air wrapping around her like a soft blanket infused with the scent of possibility. A hint of exuberance danced within her steps as she made her way down the street, the weight of her notebook still resting heavily in her bag. The challenge she had just begun felt monumental, yet the flickering spark of ambition refused to extinguish. She needed to connect those disjointed threads of her experience and weave them into the tapestry of a broader narrative. The city hummed with life, but she felt almost ensconced in a bubble, separate from the hustle and bustle. Every face she passed felt like a canvas, each imbued with stories untold, struggles hidden behind their smiles. What were these myriad tales of hopes and dreams? Were they grappling with their own uncertainties, just as she was? With every stride, a clarity emerged. Her fear of vulnerability transformed into a desire for authenticity. The thought of stepping into discomfort, of putting her truths out into the world, stopped seeming like a reckless leap and began to appear more like an invitation. Was she merely an observer of their stories, or could her voice invite connection and dialogue? A sudden urge propelled her to seek out the stranger who had sparked this fire within her, the catalyst who had dared her to confront her insecurities. What would she say when she found him? Would she convey how he had unknowingly nudged her toward a path of self-realization? Or would she leave him in the shadows of her memory, a fleeting moment that was not yet ready to bear more than that? Late evening light began to bathe the sidewalks in amber hues. Sarah had crossed the park when she saw a familiar figure seated on a bench, a silhouette slightly obscured by foliage. Her heart raced. Could it be? Approaching cautiously, heartbeat quickening, she felt both hope and trepidation swell within her. What would his reaction be? Would he remember her, or would she be just another ghost flitting through his memory? As she got closer, she noticed the same easy smile spreading across his face. There was a spark of recognition in his eyes, and in that moment, Sarah felt a sense of validation. She wasn't imagining the connection, it had a tangible form. "Hi," she said, her voice catching slightly. "I wanted to talk more about what we discussed." His gaze sharpened, the certainty in his expression reflecting back at her. "You came back. That's brave," he replied, leaning back as if settling into the moment or perhaps gauging her readiness. Bravery, a concept she had viewed in such stark terms, began to blend into something more nuanced, weaving through confidence and acknowledgement of self-doubt. As they interacted, she felt her own narrative start to take shape. Here, amidst shared breaths and memories, her words found quiet strength. With each question he posed, Sarah unearthed layers of her beliefs, slowly commencing a discourse that danced around fears and dreams, loneliness and hope. "What if my story doesn't resonate?" she ventured, a vulnerable whisper. "What if I expose myself and no one understands?" His reply resonated deeply within her. "What if your story resonates precisely because it is yours? Authenticity never falls flat." Those words settled heavily in her chest, layered with the promise of clarity and depth. Their conversation spanned hours under the waning light, transforming mundane thoughts into sparks of revelation. He seemed to understand the labyrinth of her mind, and through their dialogue, Sarah began piecing together the narrative she had long hesitated to voice. Yet, beneath the growing sense of direction, a storm of doubt still brewed. Questions unraveled in the corners of her mind, and as she prepared to part ways, she realized her quest had only just begun. How could she wield her newfound insights into a broader narrative without being consumed by the fear of exposure? Would she have the tenacity to face the backlash that vulnerability might invite? Just as that question materialized in her thoughts, his next words halted her. "Tell your story, Sarah. Face it head-on, and let it guide you." The night drew shadows long and deep as she walked away, jarred by the taste of clarity mixed with the lingering tang of uncertainty. It was time to embrace the unknown, push through the discomfort, and begin. But as she mulled over her next steps, one thought became urgent. Could she transform this moment of connection into a resilient foundation for her journey? Just then, her phone buzzed with a notification, and her heart dropped. What if it was a sign, a push toward deepening her exploration? Or perhaps, a hint from the universe guiding her to the next chapter of her self-discovery? The weight of anticipation built within her, setting the stage for what lay ahead. Sarah stood at the crossroads of her life as she prepared to deliver her first public speech under the bright lights of the conference room. The journey from that fleeting moment on the subway with Michael to this significant event had transformed her in ways she had only begun to comprehend. Gone was the exhausted waitress, she now embodied the authentic storyteller ready to share her life experiences with others. As she took the stage, she felt a rush of emotions. The familiar flicker of anxiety tried to sabotage her resolve, but she remembered the conversations she had held with the stranger in the cafe, the warmth and understanding in his gaze, and how they had unraveled layers of her past. She steadied herself and opened her mouth to share her story, a narrative forged from relentless struggles and newfound aspirations. I once felt invisible, like a ghost passing through life, she began, her voice resonating with the audience. Each word that spilled from her lips was a declaration of experience, a testament to resilience. She detailed the long hours at the diner, the weight of expectations, and the dreams that had nearly slipped through her fingers. Gradually, she wove in the insights she had garnered about vulnerability and connection, showcasing that every shadow of doubt had led her closer to the light of authenticity. Sarah noticed the audience leaning in, captivated by her honesty. The fidgeting and restlessness she had feared were absent, instead, there was silence filled with understanding. In revealing her fears, she discovered they mirrored those of others. Each person present had endured their struggles, just as she had. The realization tied them together in a shared moment of vulnerability. Every laugh and tear that followed felt like an acknowledgement of her transformation. As she approached the pivotal moment of her narrative, she found courage flowing through her veins. It's not just about overcoming struggles, it's about claiming your voice, becoming visible amidst the shadows, she proclaimed with increasing dynamism. And when the applause erupted at the conclusion of her speech, it was more than just validation, it was a powerful confirmation that her story resonated, igniting the hearts of those in attendance. A woman in the front row had tears glistening in her eyes, while others cheerfully nodded in solidarity. In this defining moment, Sarah felt palpable growth. She had shifted from doubt to confidence, and the perspective she once wrestled with now propelled her forward. As she stepped away from the podium, exhilaration coursed through her. She had conquered the fear that had held her captive for far too long, proving to herself that her story was indeed worthy of being told. After the event, Michael approached her with an encouraging smile. "You did it." His excitement was infectious. "I guess I really did," she replied, a newfound spark illuminating her expression. As moments unfolded around her, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment and validation. She was no longer the exhausted mother confined to the walls of the diner, she had become an advocate for authenticity and shared experiences. A meeting organizer approached her with an invitation for future speaking engagements, eager to elevate her voice further. Sensations of empowerment rushed through her, and she realized she was now equipped to inspire others along their paths. The initial apprehensions and nervousness had evolved into solid confidence, allowing her to embrace this new chapter of her life. Sarah stepped into the bright New York City afternoon, excited about the journey ahead. Reaching for her phone, she pulled up her notes, this time filled not just with words but with the tangible essence of her story, a life cycle brimming with promise and authenticity. She had done more than merely step into a new opportunity, she had proven to herself that she had the tenacity to navigate the uncertainties of life, and she understood that every story shared was a pathway illuminated for others. With a heart full of ambition, she envisioned a future where her voice would echo far and wide, extending her reach to those wrestling with their own shadows. And as she walked down the bustling streets, Sarah felt light as a feather, embracing her place in this vast world. Her transformation would ripple, inspiring others to reclaim their narratives, illustrating that listening to one's own story can make all the difference. Now was the time for you to join Sarah on this journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.